The rain was hammering against the funeral home windows the day I found out my own mother had erased me from her will 3 weeks before she died. I wasn't crying because she was gone. I was crying because I'd spent the last 4 years of her life taking care of her. And somehow, in her final months, my brother convinced her that I didn't deserve a single dollar of what we'd built together. My name is Rachel. And this is the story of how a 15-minute video on an old phone changed everything my family thought they'd gotten away with. I need to take you back further, though, because you won't understand how deep this betrayal cut unless you understand what came before it. I grew up the responsible one. My younger brother, Derek, was the golden child, charming, good with people, always landing on his feet even when he made a mess of everything around him. Our father died when I was 22. And from that point on, it was just me, my mother, and Derek, who drifted in and out of our lives depending on whether he needed money or a place to crash. When my mother's health started declining 8 years ago, I was the one who moved back home. I gave up an apartment I loved, a job with real growth potential, and a relationship that couldn't survive the distance I put between us the moment my mom needed me. Derek visited on holidays. He'd stay for 2 hours, take pictures for social media showing what a devoted son he was, and disappear again. I didn't resent it at first. I told myself that's just how families work. Someone steps up, someone doesn't, and love isn't about fairness. I believed that for years. I believed it while I drove my mother to chemotherapy 3 times a week. I believed it while I learned how to give her insulin injections with hands that shook every single time. I believed it while I sat by her bed at 2 in the morning because the pain medication wasn't strong enough and she needed someone to hold her hand until it was. What I didn't know was that during those same years, Derek was building something else entirely, a narrative. He started visiting more often in the last year of her life. Always alone, always when I happened to be running errands or grabbing the 1 hour of sleep I could steal. I found out later he'd been telling her things. That I was tired of taking care of her. That I complained about the burden to my friends. That I'd already started looking into assisted living facilities because I wanted my freedom back. None of it was true. Not one word. But grief and illness make people vulnerable in ways that healthy people can't always understand. My mother was scared, medicated, and desperate to believe that someone in her life still saw her as more than a burden. Derek gave her that comfort with lies. Well, I gave her the truth through exhaustion she mistook. Eventually, for resentment, 3 weeks before she passed, she changed her will. She left the house, her savings, and everything she and my father had built together to Derek. I got a small envelope with $2,000 and a note that said she hoped I'd understand. I didn't find out until after the funeral. Sitting in a lawyer's office while Derek couldn't quite look me in the eye, she just felt like you'd be fine on your own, he said. You're strong, Rachel. You've always been strong. I remember staring at him, feeling something crack open in my chest that had nothing to do with grief anymore. This was betrayal, precise and deliberate. Wearing the mask of my brother's face, 2 days later, he told me I needed to be out of the house within a month. His house now, he reminded me. He said it kindly, the way people say cruel things when they want to feel like they're not the villain. I packed my whole life into a rented storage unit and moved into a small apartment above a laundromat. The kind with thin walls and a radiator that clanked all night. I lay awake for weeks asking myself what I had done wrong. Was I not devoted enough? Was loving someone through their decline not the same as loving them the way they needed? It took months before the anger turned into something clearer. Not the desire for revenge, exactly just the need for truth to exist somewhere outside my own memory. That's when I remembered the video, 2 years before she died. During a rare good week when her energy had come back and her mind was sharp, my mother asked me to help her record something on her old phone. She said she wanted to leave a message in case she forgot things later, in case the illness took more than her body. I filmed her sitting in her favorite chair by the window, sunlight catching the silver in her hair. And she spoke for almost 15 minutes about her wishes, her gratitude, and what she wanted for both her children. I'd forgotten about it entirely until I was going through old backups on a cloud drive I hadn't touched in years. Searching for photos I could hold on to since I no longer had access to the house full of memories I grew up in. I sat on the floor of my apartment and watched it for the first time since we recorded. My mother looked directly into the camera and said words I will never forget as long as I live. She said that Rachel had given up her entire life to care for her, and that no inheritance could ever repay that kind of love. She said that if anything ever happened to change her wishes, it would only be because someone had manipulated her in a moment of weakness, and that her true intention, her real heart, was captured right there in that recording. She named specific things: the house should go to me, her jewelry should go to me, and Derek would receive the savings account because he needed help getting back on his feet, something she hoped he'd use to finally build a stable life. I remember pressing my hand against my mouth so the sound that came out of me wouldn't wake the neighbors. It wasn't proof of forged documents or fraud in the legal sense, but it was proof of who she really was before illness and manipulation clouded her judgment in those final weeks. It was proof of the truth Derek had buried under his careful lies. I didn't rush into anything. I sat with that video for 2 more weeks, thinking about what justice actually meant to me. Did I want to destroy my brother publicly? Did I want a courtroom battle that would drag our mother's memory through years of bitterness? Or did I simply want him to know that I knew, and that he could never again rewrite our history in front of me and pretend I'd believe it? I chose truth over revenge. I choose to let the truth do the work revenge never could. I invited Derek to meet me at a coffee shop, somewhere public, somewhere neither of us could raise our voices without an audience. I brought my laptop. I didn't say much. I just turned the screen toward him and pressed play. I watched my brother's face change as our mother's voice filled the space between us. I watched 30 years of assumed innocence crumble in real time. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just stared at the screen with the kind of stillness that only comes from being caught in something you thought no one would ever find. When it ended, he asked me what I wanted. I told him I didn't want the house. I didn't want the money. I wanted him to understand what he took from me wasn't property. It was the ending our mother deserved, and the peace I deserved after everything I gave up to give her one. He cried. He apologized in a way that felt more real than anything he'd said since the funeral. Whether that apology meant lasting change, I still don't fully know. But something shifted that day. He eventually offered me a portion of the estate. Not out of guilt alone, but because, for the first time, he saw me not as the strong one who could handle being erased, but as someone who had sacrificed everything out of love and deserved to be honored for it. I didn't take all of it. I took enough to rebuild, and I let the rest become his responsibility to carry. The way responsibility should have belonged to him all along. What I learned through all of this wasn't about inheritance or fairness in the way the world usually measures it. I learned that the people who show up quietly, who sacrifice without asking for applause, often go unseen until the truth finally speaks for them. I learned that love recorded in a single honest moment can outlast years of carefully constructed lies. And I learned that healing doesn't always come from getting what we're owed. It comes from finally being seen for who we really were the entire time. If you're someone who has ever given everything to a family that made you feel small in return, I want you to hear this clearly. Your sacrifice was never invisible. Someone somewhere saw it. And even if the truth takes years to surface, it always finds its way home. If this story moved you, stay with me. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. Hear stories about family, betrayal, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild your life after everything falls apart. Subscribe so you never miss the next one.